once, for example, the candidate came into the room and he was wearing a white shirt and a Scottish kilt with long socks,
Okay.
like a sock.
Was he Scottish?
Knees, yeah. No, and the person wasn't Scottish at all.
It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. I'm your host, Sean Behrens, and visit thegermanyexperience.de for more information about the show and to get in touch with me. You can also get in touch with me by sending an email to info@thegermanyexperience.de. So last week, if you listened, you would have heard that I spoke to Amaya from Spain, and she described the research project that she is doing called the Expats and Spouses Monitor. She's doing it with a colleague, Dr. Carlos Morales, and what they are doing is a research project that aims at understanding the living and working conditions of expatriates and their spouses or partners living in Germany. So the Expats and Spouses Monitor wants to generate insights that can help stakeholders, such as German employers, implement policies and measures to improve integration of expats, which is, as an expat in Germany, I'm sure you can agree, a good goal. The survey itself only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to fill in. It's completely anonymous, and they've just updated the deadline for completing the survey to the 8th of March. So if you are an expat in Germany and you'd like to contribute to their understanding of expats in Germany, go and do the survey at expatmonitor.de. Now, one of the things that foreigners coming to Germany will have to learn at some point is the entire job applications process. I did an episode back in 2019 called Finding and Getting a Job in Germany, which covered a lot of the things around the process. I covered some tips for writing a CV, some general advice for job searches, and for interviews. Now, because it's such a big topic, I'm revisiting it this week, and I guess it's not the last time that I will be revisiting it. And my guest is Ivan. He is one half of the Can You German Instagram page creators, and he was a guest on this podcast a few episodes back. But now, he's back on to talk about the job application process in Germany. And that's because he has a lot of experience and insights in this field. One of his roles is that of an HR consultant here in Germany, and he's had an insider view of what managers and companies are thinking, what they're looking for from applicants, and just general insights that can help. And of course, he's also been on the other side of the table. He's been a job seeker in Germany in the past. So he has a lot of experience and insights and knowledge about the whole process. And our discussion covers a whole bunch of things like assessment centers, common misconceptions foreigners might have about the job application process in Germany, what's important in a CV, and much, much more. And I'd like to know your specific questions about this topic because Ivan has said he would come back on the show to answer them. So take a listen to the episode. And if you have any questions for Ivan about finding a job in Germany, the applications process, or anything around this topic, send them to info@thegermanyexperience.de and Ivan will join me again to give you answers to your questions. But right now, here's Ivan. This is not your first time on the Germany Experience because you were, I can't even remember what episode it was, but it was sometime last year. And we spoke to you and your colleague, if you want to call him that, your friend and colleague, Ricardo, about Can You German, which is the Instagram page that you guys run. And,
yeah, that was a topic back then. Yeah, quite different than today's, I would say.
Very different to today's topic. So the reason that you're back, Ivan, is because you work in the HR consulting field in this direction. So you're working in Germany, and you're also an Ausländer in Germany yourself. So you obviously have some insights that can help my listeners. So that is why you're back.
Sure, and I'm very glad to be. I was kind of looking for, kind of a reason to sneak myself into the show again because I think we really had fun last time.
We had so much fun. It was really funny talking. If people haven't listened to that, they definitely should go and listen to that in that conversation. And I'll put a link to the episode in the show notes. And also go and have a look at Can You German if you haven't followed it yet on Instagram. For God's sake, people, come on. Why not?
Thanks for the free advertisement, Sean.
Oh, it's not free. You're going to pay me later.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't train to read the small print when I signed all those papers in advance.
So just give me a brief background of where you're originally from and why you're in Germany. Just very briefly for people who maybe haven't listened to the last episode.
Sure. My name is Ivan. I'm 31 years old, and I'm originally from Bulgaria, and I've been living in Germany for, well, let's say plus minus 12 years, I would say. Yeah. So basically, I came here as an exchange student, went away, came back to study, found a job, found another job. Like one thing led to another, as people say, and I'm kind of still here.
You kind of still here.
Well, I like moving all around the place when I have a chance to, but let's say especially now, I'm very much here.
Right. So as I said at the top, you are working in HR consulting along those lines, but tell me what exactly your role is at the moment.
Well, currently and for the last 3.5 years, I've been an HR consultant in the field of leadership development, as they call that. So it means, well, I'm going to oversimplify it a bit, but we have like two main areas of expertise, actually three, but the major two ones are, on the one side, conducting assessment centers. So basically, they call that diagnostics because we try out to find out about people, about their personality, about their competencies on different levels, especially related to leadership. So the other part is training courses and coaching. So training courses on communication skills, leadership skills, specific leadership tasks, for example, like giving feedback or developing your own team as a leader and so on.
Right.
So it's a very wide range, but I would say this would be a few highlights.
Yeah. So you definitely have access and have experience of what people in companies are looking for when they're hiring people, what sort of skills they need, and how they're looking, and we're going to get into all of that. We're going to get into all of that. But I just want to talk about these assessment centers for a second. Explain to me when will someone end up in an assessment center, and what happens there?
As a small addition, I wanted to say, if I only had this kind of a experience with human resources applying for jobs and assessment centers and so on, if it was only happening from this role that I have now, I would have been glad. But I had a lot to do with it when I was applying myself after my studies. Then when switching between jobs, I kind of always bumped into assessment centers. And assessment center is kind of it's not. I notice it's not a global thing yet. It's very common in Germany. I know it's very common in the US, but it really depends on the kind of position you're applying to, the contexts of the company, and so on. But basically, it's just a comprehensive procedure to get an impression of someone and decide if they're a good fit for a job or not. That would be put in simple words. And I think everybody has at some point of their lives been in an interview. And assessment centers, they just add on to the interview. They just enhance it with additional exercises, with additional type of challenges for the applicants to get an even deeper perspective of what they can do, where their strengths, and what are fields where they could develop further.
Okay. So it's really getting a good look at the applicants or even people who are already working at the companies.
Exactly. And what you just said, it's kind of important too. It's not only for outsiders applying for a job within the company or to the company. Sometimes it's really within the company. A person is supposed to get a promotion and they just want to quickly check if they fulfill the requirements on one side. But an assessment center, or in this context, they very often call it a development center. Sometimes it's really just to have a deeper look and see where are the strengths, but also what are the improvement areas? What should we focus our development efforts on? Because kind of just having a list of things to work on for the future, so people can kind of agree on measures, on tasks, and so on.
Yeah. And what are those tests that you're talking about? If you're going beyond the interview, what kind of tests and things can people expect there?
I guess the most typical ones are, on one side, a presentation. So sometimes applicants have to prepare a presentation in advance. It can have a very different focus. but it's mostly on the person. So presentation on yourself as a person, a bit like a more deeper, more psychological questions, let's say regarding what you understand under leadership, what is important to you when leading others, and so on. But it can be more like with a more strategic focus. How would you like to develop your area, your business area? What is your plan for the future? If you got this position, what would be the first things you would do? But so that's like a presentation, could be 10, 20, 30 minutes. Another typical exercises are a role play game. And that's where some some applicants are quite surprised. Okay, now I have, is like a kind of a theater kind of thing or what? I really want them to conduct a simulation, a simulated talk, let's say, with a disappointed employee, with an angry colleague, with a demanding boss, whatever, just some kind of a challenge, like an interpersonal situation where you could observe some qualities of that person.
Okay.
Yeah, and last but not least, I would say pretty often you may have some kind of a case study, some kind of a business case study. You may analyze a pack of paper, a lot of numbers, a lot of information within some time, and then you need to make a short presentation on your main takeaways or the course of action you propose for solving the issue described.
That's sounds quite intensive, though. Wow. I mean, does that take? I guess it takes place over a few days, not just one day, or is it just one intense day of?
You have all the different formats. I would say it can range. A typical one would be a half a day or a full day, like 6, 7, 8 hours. But it's enough. I mean, people are really done afterwards.
I hear you. I get done after 1 hour of hard work.
We empathize with them, definitely. But something that people don't know is that for the observers, so the people kind of making the assessment, observing the candidate, it can be as exhausting as well. Yeah. It's also kind of a long process. It requires a lot of concentration, a lot of listening, and also like in between, in the breaks, we're not just leaning back and chilling. It's usually about this kind of a follow-up discussion. All the different people within the observer team needs to come to a common conclusion.
Right.
What is our impression of the candidates? What are our takeaways? How do we perceive them?
Okay, so from your time in these assessment centers, and also, like you said, you experienced things from looking for a job in Germany, and also now you've kind of seen the other side of the table, if you will. Yes. You've seen what people are looking for, what German companies are, how they're conducting their processes, and this is where we get to the crux of what I want to talk about with you, Ivan, is just general advice for people in Germany, for foreigners in Germany going for a job application process. So things that they can expect, and also some myths and misconceptions that they might have in their minds if they've not looked for work here in Germany or gone through the job application process. And the first thing I'll ask is, from your perception, how, I mean, maybe this is a broad question, but how are foreigners perceived by the people on the other side in Germany, who are coming to, like, let's say the managers of a company or the hiring people in a company, and they're getting a foreign applicant. What things are going through their minds, and how are they viewing that foreign applicant?
I really don't know if I have a simple answer to that here, because I guess it can be extremely different depending on the context.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. I've heard a lot of stories from a lot of different people having completely different experiences, but I have to say this can be applied to the whole process of looking for a job and applying for a job in Germany overall. It depends so much on the company, on the context, the kind of people you deal with. But let's say, okay, being a foreigner, kind of an expat, I guess it can make people curious. And I mean, if you ask the applicant itself, I think almost 90% of the people are going to say, to tell you, they perceive it as a disadvantage. They feel that they have been kind of underestimated, or maybe on the other side, they feel that because of the language barriers, or not knowing the culture exactly, not knowing how these things go, they may underperform, not be able to show their full potential in this kind of a context. Yeah. And I think it's kind of a worries that we're having in our minds. I was having plenty of these as well. I've been having it all the time when applying for any kind of positions. But it turns out that people are very open and accepting. That would be my major impression and the most important one usually it's not as bad as people think it is. And many people are even curious. I mean, you coming from a specific country, coming to Germany, people are curious, why did you get here in the first place? Then they're curious about where you come from, what's different about you, what's special about you. And so it can invoke a bit of curiosity. But then also, I think it's even more important to create a good connection when kind of presenting yourself, create a connection to the people you're talking to, because you're a bit different and they know, or at least they think you're a bit different. And it's kind of important to get a touch of you as a person. Once they know you as a person, the whole national background thing kind of goes into the background. It's not so relevant anymore.
Yeah. I really like your point about the curiosity that it can spark, because I think in every single interview that I've ever been in, it's been a topic of discussion. Like, why did you leave South Africa first of all? Because of the weather. It kind of starts on a small talk level, but it definitely gives you an in that you wouldn't have necessarily had if you weren't an Ausländer. So in that respect, it's been an advantage for me, because it just lets you loosen up the conversation, make a few jokes about weather or what, dumb stuff like that. But it just gets you into the conversation, and then of course you've got something to talk about, where you're from, and in that respect, you can also bring in other things like your professional experience, your experiences moving to Germany and stuff. So it's definitely an advantage. So I like that point.
Yeah, and some people feel like Germans, they want to interview Germans, for example, but it's not true. I mean, maybe within Germany, sometimes they're also quite interested. It's something new, something more interesting. A person with a different background, it can spark a bit of an interest.
Yeah. And again, this is another broad question, because I'm just asking some broad questions, and we're going to get to some more specific observations later. But when do you think being a foreign job applicant is an advantage, and are there situations where it definitely is a disadvantage in the experience and things that you've seen?
Okay, that's a pretty good question.
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
Exactly. First of all, I assume that a person, an expat, is first of all ticking the boxes when it comes down to applying for a job. You never have to fulfill them, or you sometimes don't have to, fulfill all 100% of the requirements, but it should be most of them. And if German is required for the position, the person should be confident in that German, being able to communicate well. We're not talking about perfection, but we're talking about the requirements of the job, because these are like the hard facts, qualification, language skills, and so on. Yeah. And then I feel that in companies that have a more international focus, it's much more appreciated when someone is coming from abroad. Or also companies who want to be more international, because this is also a big trend in Germany. Companies are opening up. The whole topic around diversity has really been going on for some time. And in companies who want to be more international and more diverse, it can be even a big advantage to be a person that fulfills the qualification and brings a bit of a, variety and color into the team. And I guess a disadvantage, I would expect it, especially, it doesn't have to be a disadvantage. It's just the potential of it being a disadvantage. When you apply for a company that don't have experience, let's say in a kind of a more German context, or a company that just doesn't have a lot of foreign workers yet, and maybe is not aiming to yet, basically people kind of used to hire the kind of people they know, the kind of people that feel close to them, kind of similar people as well. In these situations, I can also imagine that it can, in some cases, be a disadvantage. But I would also like to say to people, don't overthink it. I think it's really case specific, and it doesn't have to be any big reason for concern from the very beginning.
It's not. I've gone through several job searches, most of them successful, luckily, and it's the very first one that I went to in Germany was for a big company. They were in an international company, so that I'd narrowed my search down in my early days of big companies that I knew would have a requirement for English somewhere, because they were so big and so international. And I think that's also good advice for foreigners who are looking for a job, like even before you get to the job application process. It's kind of, if you can't speak great German, then maybe look to those big international companies or small startups that are looking to create content or do their business in English. And the first job that I ever applied to, I got the job specification. I was just applying to everything that vaguely suited my abilities. And I got this one on my desk. It was for my career was back then a technical writer, and I got I fitted the profile kind of, but the one thing on that job specification said fluent German required, and back then my German was like A2 level. I think it was really basic, and I put off applying for the job. I didn't apply for it because of that. And then eventually, I think it was my wife that said, just apply for it, just send it. Like, what can they do? They can just ignore it. And I sent it off past the due date, and they came back to me within 2 days. I went through, I think, 3 interviews, and I got the job.
And I would never. Okay.
I got the job. Yeah, this is a good story.
So what happened to fluent German then?
So what happened was, because they required fluent English as well. So they definitely required the technical documentation was going to be in English, but they definitely said in the specification that fluent German is required. And I thought, if I could convince them that I can learn German in the long run, maybe the fluent English is enough to get me in the door. And that's exactly what it was. I went in there with my A2 German and started the conversation in bad German.
Yeah.
And when we got past the point where I couldn't, I switched to English. And then they kind of stayed in German here and there, except if I didn't understand questions, then they would switch to English. But they could see, okay, this guy has learned some German. He is learning. He wants to learn. And his English is great. Yeah. And then it got me in the door. So I can just say my biggest piece of advice is just just apply for the jobs. Be honest about your level, but just say, just try. It's worth a shot if you fit the profile.
I completely agree with this. I mean, so many people I think you kind of mentioned misconceptions and myths, right? So I think that's maybe one of the biggest misconceptions. First of all, people expecting that they have to fulfill 100% of the requirements and every single thing, otherwise they don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily, because let's say companies sometimes have the problem that they're getting too many applicants, and by putting a lot of requirements, they kind of try to lower the number of people. But on the other side, there are also some things that they put in there and they don't know why. Your example is the perfect one. I think you managed pretty well, even with your A2 German, right? Things were going well, yeah. So it wasn't like a core requirement for the job itself in the end, but they kind of put it in there because maybe they do it in all the job ads.
Yeah. I think that in their mind, they were thinking, okay, he's got to go to team meetings, he's got to be involved in these projects where there's a lot of Germans involved. So obviously, whoever we are hiring here has to have fluent German. But I was able to convince them somehow, and they also, like you said, I don't think that they knew that was actually maybe not a requirement that they had for that position.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also in most of the cases, HR, human resources, but also the hiring managers, they don't expect perfect performance, and also all the requirements don't have the same kind of importance to them. Some things are like essential for the job, they have to be fulfilled. Some things are more like extras, like nice to haves and so on. But you don't very often have a perfect applicant. I've barely ever had an assessment center where we had the person that really checks all the boxes, that convinces us on all the levels, that we really cannot find anything that we could be more critical about. It's every time a matter of strengths and development areas, and kind of balancing them out and taking the most informed decision possible.
Yeah.
And what you said, if they notice that you're kind of a smart guy, that you can develop, that you can really grow into this position, they're gonna put some trust in you and go for it.
Yeah, and also what I've seen in my own experience, like that one, and other consecutive or subsequent job interviews where I've gotten the jobs, but I've also seen when the company that I'm in is hiring for a position, the person that gets hired kind of creates that role when they get there. So you have the role on paper, like this is what we like you said, what the HR people and the hiring managers think that they need. But when they find someone with certain strengths and weaknesses, generally they adapt the role to what they can do. In my case, they may one of the companies that I hired for realized, oh, this guy would be good for English language checks, for example, for running through English text, which is maybe not something that they were thinking of being a possible thing for my job. So that when you get in, you kind of mold the job, and the job molds itself to you as well. So
precisely,
I think it's just you just got to get in there. about being the perfect applicant. I've definitely never been the perfect applicant for any job that I have applied for.
Modest, Sean.
No. It's honest. Like when I came to Germany, I was applying for a career that I hadn't been in before, technical writing, and I had to kind of sell myself as, I don't have experience in this, but you want to hire me because I think I can do it. And recently, about 3 years ago now, I switched jobs from technical documentation to content marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no experience in content marketing, and I actually went into that interview. I said, this is like my covering letter, and we'll talk about covering letters in a bit, but I just said, I was 100% honest with them, and I said, I don't know anything about marketing, but here's why you might want to hire me, because I have this and this experience in software development, and I know this, and I've got great English. And just that was enough to also get me in the door. So it's a case of, like you said, just keeping in mind, you're not going to be the perfect applicant for any job that you're applying. Just about. It's like you just go in with an open mind and convince them that you could fit the role that doesn't exist yet.
Exactly. And I think one thing you did while talking about this in this interview is showing that you know your own strengths and weaknesses. You know what you can, you know what you still have to learn. You kind of think about how your previous experiences can be beneficial to the company. This kind of wide perspective is what people want as well. Yeah, they don't want someone to come there, be able to do kind of, the task, a specific task, and just keep hammering something with a hammer all day long without looking to the left and to the right, without being interested in what's happening around them. People want people showing initiative and actively developing themselves, looking how they contribute to the company overall.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the misconceptions, and one of them being that there is no perfect applicant for a job, and that quite often the HR people and the hiring managers don't know what they want either.
Yeah.
What other misconceptions do you think that foreigners going through the job application process might have?
Maybe some of them are more like Germany specific. I've noticed that a lot of people have this picture of Germans being very formal, especially Germans in business context. Everything is exact. Everything is about the work. No small talk. No personal relationships, and so on. And I think these stereotypes are sometimes extending to the application process as well. And I sometimes notice this in the behavior of people when they, when they sit there for an interview, or when they have make a presentation within an assessment center. And this is important because I was surprised to find out how important this personal connection is to people, to German people as well. They're people after all as well, The worst that can happen is that after a few hours, or maybe after an interview, the HR people and the hiring managers just discuss, I don't know, they look competent, they look like they can do the job and so on, but I didn't get a sense of them as a person, I've heard this so many times, and usually it's something very negative, because people want to feel this connection. They want to know you as a person and so on. And kind of putting on a straight face, being too formal, too stiff in an interview or in this kind of a situation gives exactly that impression. People cannot see the person behind you. They perceive the role that you're trying to play out. And this is a major disadvantage.
I think you're right. You've got to be authentic to a degree. You also got to judge the situation, because there are companies that are a little bit more formal, but that's not because it's German. That's just the corporate culture more than anything else. So you got to kind of judge the company that you're applying for. And I don't know how you do it. It's very difficult when you're just applying, but I think it's important to be authentic and let your actual personality shine through, because if it is a very formal, rigid company and you're not a formal, rigid person, you're not going to fit there anyway. So don't pretend that you're that, because you're not going to fit in there.
That's another point as well. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite important that people, they should be authentic, as you say. That's one. And they should reveal information, sometimes a bit of, when they have a chance to introduce themselves, it shouldn't be only about the previous experience, about their education. People can say, I don't know, what they do in their free time, their family situation, where they live, what do they like about the place they live, This kind of people are open. I've really seen so many people after presentations say, okay, they were supposed to present themselves, Yeah, but they didn't say about something about their private situation,
Yeah.
and that's when
Yeah.
I realized it's kind of important for people. That's one
Yeah.
thing. And the other is in interviews, also, kind of the typical questions of what are your strengths and weaknesses? Where did you have a failure in the past? What was a situation where you didn't reach your goals and how did you go about it? These kind of situations are not uncommon, and no one expects that you're kind of the perfect applicant that never had conflicts, never had negative experiences, and has no weaknesses overall.
Yeah.
Uh, it's pretty much even the opposite. People want to hear also like a bit about the dark side, and by
Yeah.
this they can also judge about how open you are, how authentic you are, but also how you deal with these kind of things. How reflected you are, if you learn out of your mistakes, and so on.
So just be honest as much as you can. I mean, don't go crazy on the honesty. Like if there's a major flaw, you might want to hide it a bit. But yeah,
Exactly.
you can kind of just be you have to be honest in these things because they're gonna find that out anyway. If you when you're in the door, they're gonna discover what your weaknesses are anyway because it'll become clear over time. So I always like to be honest with those kinds of things, like where I also have a pretty picture in my mind of where I struggle or what I'm going to struggle with, and I don't I don't hide the fact.
But you
But
also,
it's
like in your example, you didn't say, no, actually, I'm not a marketing person, and full stop. You kind
no,
of elaborated on it. You showed like what does it mean for you. But you showed the other aspects of your previous experiences that can be useful. You showed
yeah,
willingness to learn, and
yeah,
it's the very same kind of thing when you get these kind of questions. If
yeah,
they ask you about a bad experiences or a situation where you couldn't reach a goal, you can tell them, but then you can tell them also what happened, what you tried, what didn't work out, but most importantly, what is your learning experience? What
mm,
would you do differently next time you come across a similar situation?
yeah,
Because that's what these questions aim at, kind of seeing how open you are on one side, but also kind of on how reflective you are, if you're capable of thinking about yourself, about your own experience, and
right,
growing out of that.
yeah. And what other misconceptions and myths do you think that there might exist in foreigners' minds?
I don't know. There are a lot of Germany specific things that people don't know about, but I wouldn't say it's misconceptions. But sometimes people don't consider certain aspects of the German way of doing things or applying.
Okay. Do you have examples that come to mind about that? Like things that people might not hit?
Well, let's say some things that surprised me, or I've seen people from abroad being surprised about the way things are done in Germany. Yeah? The number of documents, first of all.
Yes.
In HR, some people expect, okay, a person is applying, we get their CV, we get their motivation letter, a cover letter, 2 pages, 2 pages, a 2 page long CV and a one
Yeah.
page of a cover letter. That's fine. 3 pages, this is the application. Not in Germany. Here you need to prove you need a proof for everything that you state, and you state a lot of things in your CV. You said you went to
Mm.
school, we need to see your school living certificate. You said you went to university, we need to see all the transcripts and kind of a
Yeah.
certification from university. And then people add things. They kind of after you leave in job in Germany, you get kind of a qualified recommendation, kind of a
Like a
document.
reference.
Yeah, says something about the tasks you fulfilled, but also how good you were at them and at different
Mm.
aspects. So
Mm.
for every job you had, you're supposed to add this kind of a recommendation or Zeugnis, whatever you would call that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, considering that you're a person with experience, it may be quite a few of them, yeah. And if you're just a fresh graduate fresh out of university, people feel like, oh, I had my 3 week internship and my 6 week internship. Let's add all those Zeugnis because we need them. Oh,
Mm.
by the way, I have a level A1 in French. I need to add my certificate as well. So what HR gets is this kind of a stack of documents. And another culture shock is when they're all printed, when you get them via
Yeah.
mail and not
I
via
know.
email or anything. Some companies have a standardized process and they set a big no to all this kind of paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but for many companies, it's quite open. You can apply any way you want. And in Germany, it really used to be a thing to apply in a fancy kind of a file, something that
Right.
looks nice, that
Yeah.
says with big shiny letters, Bewerbung on top, that
Yes.
has a big picture of you made by the professional photographer and these kind of things. And this is still happening. People think it's kind of an advantage.
Right.
But
But it isn't.
it probably depends on the HR person. When I was in HR administration, I can tell them it wasn't. For me, it
Yeah.
wasn't.
It
It
wasn't a
creates
big
so
deal.
much extra work.
Well, all the jobs that I applied for were really, I didn't give a lot of documents, and I was fortunate. But like I said, I've worked for almost only international companies until quite recently when I worked for smaller German startups.
Yeah.
And there it's also relatively less bureaucratic, I would say, with the applications process. So for me, I was lucky enough that it wasn't a case of having to send all those documents. But I've seen those Bewerbung files, or whatever they call them, that people do. It's quite impressive. I'd hate to sift through those.
Well, one question to you, by the way. Coming from South Africa, did you put a picture on your CV?
No, no.
No?
Why would you? Why
What?
would you? Right?
Well, it's a thing in Germany. Like people
Yeah.
always, I mean, they used to always have a picture on their CVs, and they still do. And on this kind of a trends coming from the US, I would say, this anti-discrimination rules and so on are only starting to arrive, so that in some companies you're explicitly asked not to. But
Yeah.
otherwise, it's normal here to have a picture on your CV, and if you don't, people are skeptical. They're like,
That's what I was going to ask you.
"Why
I was going to ask you, yeah, what is the view when you don't put a picture on your CV from the other side of the desk? So it definitely creates some sort of skepticism.
It's a question mark. It's not negative per se, but it's a question mark because it's kind of normal to have a picture. So the question is why. And
Yeah.
Germany is a more security-focused culture. They want the complete information. They want to know you. They're curious what you look like. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so I would rather say it's an advantage if you put your picture on. But the
Yeah.
one thing is, it should be a good picture. That's definitely a small recommendation. And in Germany,
And
it's
by
kind of
good, you mean
expected that
professional.
professional, ideally. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes a homemade, self-made picture can be of very high quality too. But I
Yeah.
would say ideally professional, and yeah, kind of a good one.
So since we're discussing the CV aspect, and the German CV is pretty specific. It's got its own set of rules and stuff. First
Mhm.
of all, what do HR and business people at German companies pay attention to in that CV?
The completeness of the information and so on would be one thing. So it's I mean, there are a lot of discussion of how long a CV should be, and I'm really not taking a stance here, because a lot of people would say a CV has to be one page, or you should never go beyond 2 pages. I mean, as an HR person, the most important thing is to get the information you're looking for quickly. So a CV should be formatted in a way that really helps you get an orientation. You see, okay, that's where
Yeah.
the education is, that where the jobs are. Kind of you can use the space around things as well, kind of to make it easy to read and to make easy to recognize the things that an HR person could be interested in.
Okay.
Um, so about the length and so on, I think it's secondary. The important thing is really just to get information. But then there's some like specific things in Germany. I heard that some people pay attention to that, but apparently it's very important to put your signature on the bottom. That's
Really?
something that, yeah, not everybody does it, but some people
I've
say,
never done that.
absolutely important. And when you put a signature in Germany, you need to put a date, because people need to know when the CV was prepared. It's crucial
Sure.
information, right? And when you put a date, people don't just put a date in Germany. It's like signing a contract, so you have to put the city where you sign the contract. So it says like the 12th of March, 2012, in Dusseldorf, with a big, nice signature of yours. Some people that are really picky about the rules, they would pay attention to this, because this, for example, it's kind of the etiquette, kind of
Yeah.
what's expected.
Yeah. What I'm understanding from you is that that etiquette, those unwritten rules, or those rules of a CV, are kind of important. So if you don't have a photograph, you didn't put your signature on it, are there alarm bells going off, even if they know that you're a foreigner?
For those, not necessarily, because I guess people kind of have common sense. They know that the idea of a CV can be different of what. But if you want to be perfect, you can kind of consider those small things. What's much more important, and now we're getting to the content, I think, is some people have heard it already, but some employers even say it needs to be a lückenloser Lebenslauf, a CV without any gaps, a gap-free CV, and that's because that when it gets really, really funny, because they really want to know what have you been doing at every single stage of your life, and if they
Right.
perceive a gap that's not indicated, in the good case, they would be thinking you're unemployed for some time. But being
Yeah.
unemployed is not a good thing, Only the unqualified people are unemployed for some time.
Right.
If you really
Yeah.
go into stereotypes, not everybody's going to be so judgy, but that's what they could think. But the other thing is prison time. People may think that you're a criminal, and that's why there is a gap in your.
Right.
I've heard this from quite a few people, but worst case, that would be some possible interpretation. I mean,
Yeah.
it may be a bit exaggerated, but there is a general expectation that you have no gaps in the CV, and if there is a gap, people are going to ask you about it.
Okay. So that's interesting because the rule then is if you do have a gap in your CV for whatever reason, then just explain it. So put the date. Are you saying put the date period in and explain, or like in a paragraph, as you would for the other positions that you were in, what was happening during that time, like why you had.
I mean, the question is also how you put it in words. If it was parenting, you can put parenting. If it was a sabbatical traveling around the world, you can also put it like this. Yeah.
Because that's exactly that. The guest that I've had on last week, Amaya, I spoke to Amaya from Spain, and she is currently in this process of putting together a research project, or they have put a research project together, and they've got a survey that people can fill out. And they wanting to figure out, what are expats expecting with regards to working and what's going to make them happy. And their idea is to give that data to employers. That's one of their plans. There's a lot of plans they want to do with this data to kind of to educate employers about expats and foreigners and so on. So that's what they're doing. It's a great project. But one of the things that Amaya brought up is that generally expats often do have those gaps because they're people who traveled, or they're people who maybe, let's say, came with their spouse to Germany and spent a period of time not working, but they were looking for work potentially, or maybe they were stay at home for a while, who knows. But expats do tend to have these gaps on their CVs. And she also mentioned that it is negatively viewed, and she wants to educate employers and so on that it's not necessarily bad. But I like what you're saying is just to highlight the fact that this is the gap. And if you were in prison, say in prison, but just to show that you weren't maybe in prison when you weren't, just say what you were doing during that time and explain how it fits into the overall picture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I guess every time you have a feeling that something in your CV may be interpreted in a wrong way, or maybe people can kind of fall into stereotypes and so on, use the cover letter. I think the cover letter is exactly not to repeat everything that you have done in the past. That's why you have your CV,
Yeah.
You can really use it to explain your motivation, explain what you have been doing, and kind of answer those questions or question marks people may be having. If you were 5 months unemployed because you just arrived to Germany, then in your cover letter you can say, after being in Germany for a few months and kind of settling down, studying German, and helping my whatever was happening at that time, then you can kind of mention that now I'm kind of looking for the next step, looking for the next challenge, looking for the next thing to do.
Yeah. That is very interesting. But my philosophy with my job applications in Germany has always been to I put in just enough in my CV to show the points of what I was doing during the period, like the experience that I have, but very, very briefly. And I've always thought of it in Germany as a conversation starter. I just want them to see what I did, that I do have qualifications somehow, but there's not enough in there. They'll have to ask me that in the interview, but hopefully it gets their attention enough. But then my cover letter is exactly like you say, where I specifically talk about specific things that I think are important. And the important thing is that I've learned about covering letters is that you have to anpassen. You have to adapt it to the job that you're applying for, that specific job specification. You have to say why you suit that specific job as they put the points down, why you meet those criteria. And I'll ask you now what you think, Ivan, if you agree with that. But that's the way I've always done it, because then you have the CV that gets their questions that they can base their questions on. But then they've got that specific thing where I'm motivating why they should look at me specifically for that specific role. So don't just copy and paste. Make it specific to that job.
That's true. Exactly. It's highly appreciated. It's really highly appreciated because they notice this person is really motivated for us, for this position, and they really put some work into this as well. And it's very easy to recognize one of these universal kind of cover letters. And I want to provide added value to your company. I'm reliable and so on.
Bullshit.
So on. It's exactly. I mean, of course, everybody can say that for any position, and it's important to make it personal, kind of a highlight what parts of your experience are going to be relevant to the task we are talking about.
Yeah.
And especially important are those things, because you kind of talked about German misconceptions, or let's say specific things. One thing that I noticed Germans have a very different perspective on is the course of your development. Germans speak about the roten Faden, the kind of the red thread, the kind of the main idea. Like you're born with an idea. You know exactly where you want to go, and every single step in your life is a step in this direction. There is no going to the left or to the right. Everything is along the roten Faden.
Right.
It's something that's highly appreciated too when they see that it's been kind of a very straightforward. It's been a logical development. So when you're kind of going to the left, to the right, trying out different things and so on, it's not like, let's say, in the US where it's kind of an advantage. It's like experience from different fields. It can be even perceived as a disadvantage in terms of this person is kind of jumping back and forth. They still haven't figured out life, really. I mean, I'm exaggerating everything a bit, but it can.
Sure.
It's another question mark in the heads of people, and another slight disadvantage that you should kind of mention in your cover letter. Also, kind of point out why did you take this kind of different steps, and why it also makes sense, why it was a very logical development, giving you a lot of qualifications that are going to be useful for what you want to do next.
Right. A big question is that, and it's a question that I've heard several times before, is this cover letter and the CV, is it good to have it in German or English if you're a foreigner? Like how do you handle that? Because in the beginning, I couldn't write, in fact, I still can't write a well-formulated German cover letter, for example, and definitely not a CV.
Yeah.
How do they view it when they get in an English application, for example?
That's a very good question, to be honest. I mean, everything I can say would be my personal opinion.
Give me your personal opinion, Ivan.
If German is essential to the job, make it in German. If English is going to be the main language of the company or to the job, make it in English. Mm-hmm. If you feel like, in your case, it's going to put you in disadvantage to have it in German, then I would say stick to English. If you claim that your German is at A1 level, but then you have a perfect, long, complicated cover letter in perfect German, it's also weird. Then stick to English, yeah?
Yeah.
But in all the other cases, I would say, if possible, make it in German, especially if it's kind of the main language of the job of the company.
Yeah, it's very, very tricky. I would agree. I also did everything in English, but I was also selling myself as an English native speaker to all the positions that I was going to, which is not going to be the case for someone who's not an English native speaker, who's maybe from Spain or from one of those other countries, and English is also a second language.
Yeah.
And it gets a bit tricky because you don't want to raise false expectations by creating a German CV and a cover letter. But what I would recommend, if you're doing a German cover letter and you're getting someone to help you with it and write the German well, in that cover letter, clearly explain what your German level is in the cover letter. You don't have to say someone helped you do the letter, because I think Germans will figure that out in their minds. But just make sure your cover letter is clear. Like, my German is at an A1 level, and then the Germans will go, okay, they clearly had someone help them with this. I guess would be my advice there.
But at the same time, of course, if you're fluent in German, then just don't even mention it. You put
knock that shit out there
and make a great, wonderful German. Let your friends check it. I mean, by the way, all these kind of documents, they need to be perfect. Spelling, any kind of spelling mistakes, commas, whatever. No, get rid of it. That's what really can convey a pretty negative impression from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing. Like, spelling mistakes and grammar errors are going to detract from your application.
So what I said before, kind of you don't have to be perfect when you apply for a job. I still think this is very much true, and people kind of think that employers they only want perfect candidates. But your documents need to be perfect, because this is the only information people have about you, and it's kind of it's an expectation that you're going to put effort into this and make them look nice and so on. Yeah. So when they see, if they have like spelling mistakes or some formatting issues in the documents, I mean, what does it tell me about the way these people do their work?
Yeah.
And I guess this is important.
Yeah. So, Ivan, tell me, in your experience, like, you've been working in your role for a while now, tell me about some surprising moments that you may have come across, or things that Things that, may have that stand out in your mind. Let's put it that way.
I know the variety of people kind of always amazes me. They're all these kind of different kind of people, from the ones that are very kind of being a bit too serious and formal to the one that are a bit like speaking to their friends. So like you're sitting at a bar and kind of having the interview there. It's kind of it's very very different. But I had some interesting situations with candidates. Like once, for example, the candidate came into the room and he was wearing a white shirt and a Scottish kilt with long socks,
Okay.
like a sock.
Was he Scottish?
Knees, yeah. No, and the person wasn't Scottish at all. It was a regular German person. It was an internal candidate working for the company for years and years and years. And I was looking at them and just looked to the left to the hiring manager, looked to the right to the HR person. Nothing, no reaction. Yeah, and I was like, okay, let's just ignore this and just go with the flow. Yeah? And then they told me, oh yeah, he's been like running around like this for months or like for weeks.
He does
now.
that.
He does that exactly. I was like, whoa. Another interesting area is all the role play games that we kind of do with participants. Usually it would go like this, you're the candidate, you go to the other room and get like an instruction where a fictitious company is described in kind of a leadership situation that you need to handle. You're this kind of manager, you have this kind of team, this one employee, this is their name, their background, and this is what you've been observing lately and you would like to address in a feedback talk. And as you can imagine, it's mostly about something crucial, so something negative that needs to be kind of addressed, that you need to talk about, like a difficult topic. And these conversations can go in a very different directions.
Really?
I mean, colleagues of mine told me they were fired. I mean, just imagine you're playing the employee, you're playing the role of the employee, and the manager comes in, the candidate in the assessment center. And they lead the conversation, and you're kind of showing a bit of resistance and not quite agreeing with them. And they fire you. They tell you, well, then you can go and pack up your stuff, You are not getting the job. These role plays are supposed to test your interpersonal skills.
Yeah,
you're not getting the job if you fire the employee.
Sounds something like it's directly out of The Office comedy or something like that.
Exactly. Well, nobody fired me at least, but I was kind of shouted at, or at least there was a person that stood up, was banging against the board, showing nothing at the imaginary results and telling that it's not acceptable and so on.
And what about the other side of the table when you're applying for jobs in Germany yourself? Like, what have you? How has job applications for you gone in general in Germany?
Also, really different, to be honest. Yeah, like. Depends pretty much on the kind of company you're I mean, in one company I was applying, we had like a 2-hour IQ test, and a personality test. And then we were like in one room and they were calling us and telling us if we stay there for the next day or if we are supposed to go home. So we're kind of in this kind of a casting kind of show, sitting there and waiting for the judges to say what your fate is, And sometimes, or I know in one assessment center in my company, we don't do this, but we had to create something. They gave us a task as a team with the other candidates, and we had to create some kind of I don't even know how to call that in English, a kind of we had to create some kind of a small path make out of a paper and cardboard and plastics and everything that we had.
Oh God.
Put a small marble and let it throw down it, and it was supposed to be as long as possible and things like that.
I hate stuff like that.
Exactly. It wasn't related to the job, and that's one of the biggest points of criticism. I mean, how much can you learn from a situation that's not even has nothing to do with the job? There are like mixed opinions on this, but I was like, okay, I'm sitting with people. We are all fighting for the same job, and we're creating some kind of a, a thing out of paper using scissors and and Scott and everything.
No, I'd be out of there. I wouldn't enjoy that very much. Yeah, like I said, I've had several job applications, and they've all gone pretty well. There haven't been any weird things. But the very first one that I went to, I had a 2-hour train trip to get there because it was in Frankfurt and I was living in Würzburg at the time. And of course, I got dressed up in a suit. I was very formal, and I never dress in suits. But I did for this first because, like, exactly that. My misconception in my mind was that Germans are very serious, they formal, and whatever else. And I was on the way to I was just happy to have a job interview in Germany. And on the train on the way there, when I was going through my notes and what am I going to say and everything, I looked down and I realized my suit pants had a rip at the crotch. They were completely ripped. You could see my underwear. And that was my first job interview in Germany. I got off the train and I realized, and then it's all you're thinking about. Like, it doesn't matter what else you're going to do. All you're thinking about. So I went into the offices, and then I was told to sit down in the room and wait for the hiring manager and the HR to come and do my interview. And then I was trying to find the perfect way to sit. Like, do I cross my legs like Sharon Stone style in Basic Instinct? Or do I just kind of scooch up right underneath the desk and hope no one sees? But there were glass tables as well. So you could see, like, underneath the tables as well.
What are the chances?
The whole way through the discussion, that's all I thought about, because, like, I knew that if I just made the wrong move, people would be able to see my underwear. I got that job, but it was a stressful time, I can tell you, because, like I said, that's all you remember.
People, to everybody out there, every time you put on a suit you haven't been wearing for quite some time, check for any rips. I don't know how it happens, but Sean, this is exactly the story of how I lost my driving license for 1 month in Germany.
Really? What?
It was already, like, quite a few years ago, but just my company wasn't so strict about time and everything, but there was this really important meeting with my boss and the boss of my boss at 9 o'clock sharp, so I had to be there on time. I was there pretty much on time, but already there I noticed I have this huge rip in my pants as well.
Really?
I don't know, but then I decided not to go into the meeting like this, but to drive home, changed. And there's this one street on the way to work, and I was kind of running late already. And there's this one street that is completely empty, feels safe, but it's still within the city. So what happens? I got blitzed. I got by a camera and everything. It totally wasn't worth it. I lost my driving license for a month, and when I got to the office, it turned out that the meeting is postponed.
I love those stories. Wow, it could have been worse. At least it's just a month that you lost your license. It could have been worse.
It could have been worse. That's completely true. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Ivan, it's been really good to talk to you about this subject. It's something. It's cool to have someone that sits on the other side, has an insight into how people on that side of the table are thinking. And this is something now that I haven't discussed with you yet, but I want to throw it out here. If you say no, I'm going to have to take this part out of the episode. But
okay.
What I would really like to do is to give people the chance to ask questions that they might have about the job application process in Germany. And maybe we could get you back on for another episode in a few months to come and answer some of those questions that people might have. Is that something you would be willing to do?
Why not? Sure. Yeah. I mean,
you have to do it. You're on air now. You have to agree to it.
I know, right? No, cool. Seriously, I would love to. It would be a pleasure, and I'm always very glad to help. I mean, now it's a short time when we are kind of trying to cover a lot of different topics.
There's so much.
Questions can be very specific, and I can completely imagine that. And I've kind of become also within my friends the guy you ask when you have questions about assessment centers and things like that. I'm always very happy to help. If you say we should do this, if there is interest from your audience, I would be happy to. Yeah.
So here's the thing. If you have specific questions about assessment centers or the job application process in general, what Germans are expecting, what you should do in certain situations, send them to info@thegermanyexperience.de. And I will, if I get enough questions, I will get Ivan on again to the podcast to answer specific questions that you might have. Ivan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you being here a second time. I think this was very insightful. Hopefully it helps some people get their minds around the process here in Germany and gives them some tips. Where can people find you?
I don't know, the usual things. I'm on Instagram with Ivan, like Ivan.og, but it doesn't come from Original Gangster, by the way.
Yeah.
Ivan.og.vasilev, Visilev. That's my Instagram. And now that we are talking about Instagram, feel free to check out Can You German at
Definitely.
written together.
Don't feel free to check it out. You have to check it out. That's definitely check it out. What do you like? If you haven't, why? Yeah, definitely check that out. And I will put the links to all of those in the show notes. Ivan, thanks for joining me. And we'll maybe talk to you in a while.
Thank you, Sean. It was a pleasure as usual. And now I notice that we've been talking for over an hour now.
Yeah.
I'm about to say the one thing that many candidates say after the interview. Oh, I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, you did not, Ivan.
We get in touch quite soon.
See ya. All right, that's it this week. Remember, send me your specific questions about the job application process in Germany to info@thegermanyexperience.de, and Ivan will come back and answer them in a later episode. Next week, I have 2 expat podcasters in Germany as guests. I don't want to give away who they are, but I will say they're 2 Americans who like drinking whiskey and who live in Germany. I've said too much. Music in this episode by my band 10 Cent Janes. Additional music by Ryan Anderson. Until the end, stay healthy. Auf Wiederhören.